Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search.
Hello everyone and welcome back into the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast. In my third segment, I'm going to be making my picks for some of the biggest games of the weekend, and this could be the best installment of this segment yet because there are 4 fascinating games with a ton of playoff implications, whether it be at the bottom half of the bracket or the top half. And so, without further ado, let's jump right into it. All 4 of these games could have big stakes how the outcome of the season looks. So, I'm going to be as excited as possible for it, and I hope you guys follow suit in the comments as well if you so choose. Without further ado, like I said, let's start off with this potential Super Bowl matchup we kind of got into a little bit earlier in today's show. It is Bills-Lions. What an amuse-bouche for what could be a February entree down the stretch. Lions, 2.5-point favorites, and I feel deservedly so, like I alluded to earlier, because of the fact that even though the Bills are highly suited for shootout football, I do believe that this game will be a shootout and will come down to the final couple of possessions. I feel like I'm leaning Lions just because they do it in a more efficient manner. And I feel like this Bills defense is a little bit too staid going up against certain offenses. They're a little bit too structured going up against these efficient, hyper-focused offenses. And so, if I'm the Lions, I feel like I can attack them early and often in so many different ways that, from an efficiency standpoint, potentially the Bills will have to play catch-up much like they did against Los Angeles. But the reason why I'm picking the Bills to cover is because the Bills are apt to keep up. This is a team built to play much like Detroit. And so, in that manner, against another depleted defense in Detroit, the Bills can almost certainly cover this spread here. I do think the Lions will ultimately end up winning just because in terms of time of possession, I think they win that battle. And their special teams unit is a bit better, and that will matter in this matchup as well. But ultimately, what I'm looking for is high caliber play from both of these offenses. Because if this truly is the Super Bowl matchup we see in February, look for an exhilarating, thrilling Part 2. And if it turns out that this game is shockingly low scoring, I'll accept that too. Because what it tells me is that both of these teams are primed for playoff football. If you're Detroit, you know that you can rely on this next man up mentality that Dan Campbell has employed throughout his tenure and rely on your depth to carry you far. And if you're the Bills, it proves that that LA game was just a fluke where your defense was horrid on third down defense, and ultimately the Rams played a perfect game to beat you. And so that's what I'm looking for in this game, whether it's high scoring or low scoring. With that being said, I'm going to go with the latter because it will make for the more thrilling game. And I'm going to take the Lions in a, let's say, it's another 44-42 type game. Potentially maybe a 42-41 type game. But let's say it's the same result we saw in that Bills-Rams game. But I do think the Bills will cover just because I know what this offense is capable of, and we saw it in that game against LA. Now let's talk about a game in the AFC that has a lot of importance in the wild card race. Colts-Broncos. 2 young, exhilarating quarterbacks looking to be the future and faces of their franchises. For the Broncos, it's Bo Nix, who, yes, might be a little bit overhyped at this point in the season, but still has been playing exceptional football in a very tough system to learn under Sean Payton. On the Colts side of things, you have Anthony Richardson, a guy who can be the most exciting quarterback in the NFL at times, but is too inconsistent, too raw, and ultimately hasn't played that often to really assess. And so in this matchup, the Broncos easily, as 4.5 point favorites, will win this matchup. And ultimately, I do want this to be an exciting game. And there will be moments where Anthony Richardson is doing things correctly. He's making right reads. He's making exceptional throws that a very few number of quarterbacks can make in this league. But the Broncos are the better team. And I'm not necessarily saying that Bo Nix right now is the quote-unquote better quarterback, but he is playing better and has shown that he can mature into the NFL. And yes, while I can't necessarily give Anthony Richardson that benefit of the doubt because we haven't really seen him that as often as Bo Nix, surprisingly enough, in the NFL, I do feel like that matters in this matchup, even though this Colts team has proven that even though it does not look like a playoff team wholeheartedly, that there are bits and pieces of this roster that play playoff caliber football. And so, even if they put it all together, it's going to be kind of interesting to see if the Colts can truly hang with a fellow wildcard hopeful. Because right now, I just think the Broncos are a couple tiers above them in how they play, especially on the defensive side of the football, where they've really grown leaps and bounds under Vance Joseph. But ultimately, the reason why I'm leaning Broncos wholeheartedly here is because I feel like Bo Nix right now looks the more mature of the two. Not indicting Anthony Richardson at all, because he has the potential. But ultimately, it's too raw to win a game like this in an important matchup for his team. So that's why I'm taking the Broncos as 4.5-point favorites. And then another game, a cross-conference matchup with wild card implications. How about Bucs Chargers? A lot of people are kind of underrating this game, but I think it could be one of the better ones on the Sunday slate. Chargers 3-point favorites coming into this, potentially as the better team, but we've seen the deficiencies of this offense sans J.K. Dobbins. If you don't have explosiveness in the run game, Justin Herbert has to revert to hero ball, and surprisingly, he can't do it as much as he did in the Brandon Staley era because he's fully bought into this Jim Harbaugh philosophy and not throwing the football too much. But when he is timely enough and opportunistic enough, he has the weapons over the middle of the field in Ladd McConkey and Will Dissly, two guys he's relied upon a lot, new faces in this offense, mind you, to carry the load for them. On the Bucs side of things, and the reason why I think I'm taking them in this game, they just never say die. No matter who the opponent is, no matter how tough the circumstances are, Baker Mayfield has shown that his swagger is not a fluke. He, with his moxie and his never say die mentality, just goes out there and plays as clean football as he's played in his entire NFL career, and wins football games as a result. And that's the reason why they now have the upper hand in the NFC South. They still have to win most of their matchups down the stretch because the Falcons do have that tiebreaker over them. And this one perhaps is going to be one of their more difficult ones because this Chargers defense is still elite, no matter how young it is. Now, ultimately, the reason why I'm taking the Bucs is because of Baker Mayfield. And because of the fact, even in dire circumstances, without one of his top receivers in Chris Godwin, he relies on the depth of this team. And we can't necessarily say that about a lot of quarterbacks in these situations. So look for the Bucs to spring a semi-upset here against a Chargers team that have not necessarily been in this position before, where they're fighting for a playoff spot with a kind of new mentality and new offensive philosophy, and hold the house money in this matchup, really, as the favorite. So look for them to kind of tense up a little bit, especially without a player who could really have been a difference maker in this game in J.K. Dobbins. So that's why I'm taking the Bucs in this matchup, shockingly. Just because I feel like, right now, they have a ton of momentum. And so they're just going to continue to use that momentum and grow into this game. And the final matchup, one I'm really, really thrilled, is coming back to the NFL, this time with Geno Smith and Jordan Love headlining it in the PNW Packers-Seahawks, one of the most underrated NFC rivalries of the past 2 decades. And the reason I love this game is when it takes place in Seattle, magic happens. I can't forget, as a Seattle Seahawks fan, the Fail Mary in the 2015 NFC Championship game. Two of the most legendary games in Seattle Seahawks history. And so that's why I feel like Seattle certainly can buy into that magical atmosphere, buy into the 12s being behind them in this perhaps the most important remaining game in their season, despite them playing the Rams potentially for their NFC West lives in the final week of the season. I feel like this is the most important game. But then the Packers, you look at them and you say, well, they're 1-4 against teams with a winning record in the NFC, but they have so much balance on offense, and Josh Jacobs is playing lights out football at the running back position, and Jordan Love has looked fantastic ever since coming back from that week 1 injury. And you say, well, Seattle certainly, in this matchup historically, have just been the better team, but I do feel like this is one step too far for them, maybe. And the Packers are 2.5-point favorites on the road here, so I have to give them the benefit of the doubt. And so, in this very tough matchup, I am going to take the Packers here, proving that I'm unbiased here. Because at this moment, I feel like the Seattle defense really has started to get Mike Macdonald's vision here and employ it on the field. But this Packers offense is a different breed. Because if you stop one thing, you stop one aspect of it, another thing can quickly get going. So it's going to have to come down to if Seattle can limit the run game and pressure Jordan Love enough. If they can't do one or both of those things, then chances are the Packers have the upper hand, and I'm right in my assessment. But I do still have faith that potentially Seattle can slow down at least one of them. But ultimately, this Packers offense is versatile enough to get another aspect going of that offense. So that's why I'm taking the Packers here as a Seahawks fan. I hope it's another fantastic installment in this rivalry. I'm excited to see this rivalry come back. But ultimately, what a slate of Sunday games. What a slate of weeks we have ahead in this NFL season. But coming up next, I'm concluding my positional rankings for this first round playoff week with my defense and special teams units to monitor. Hope you guys enjoy it because it could be the final such segment we do on this show. But we'll be right back after this short break to cover it.